Welcome to the second webinar from Hands on Agile. Today we will be addressing Agile maturity and agility assessment. I'm your host, Stefan Wolpers. So why the effort to dig into this topic? That is something rather personal to me because I'm tired of listening to people telling me that Agile does not work here. We tried and we failed for whatever reason. It's a hoax. It's a fad. Why would I do this? I simply believe that this has a lot to do with the Agile industrial consulting complex because Agile has become such a tremendously lucrative business. I've been tracking the number from Scrum Alliance, the certified Scrum trainers, and the number of Scrum Alliance members. And if you do the math, being a certified Scrum trainer should net you via certification workshops about $500,000 a year. We have people like the good folks from SAFE who sell very successfully some kind of package, sort of Agile. So it's really a lucrative business. And the first thing you learn in a consulting business is that when you start selling something to your customer, you sell something that you already have worked out in your drawer. So basically, you like to sell patterns, frameworks, methodologies even better, because then you can just pull out the checklist and you know exactly how much you can charge the client and how this is all going down. And I believe this is the wrong approach. You simply need to figure out for each and every organization what might work in the long run, where the company has a prospect to get, and one size fits all simply doesn't work. Let's start at the beginning. Why do organizations want to become agile? I don't know who of you has read Jeff Sutherland's The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, which I believe still is a very problematic title for the whole thing because it results in answers from the C-level. When you ask them, why do you want to become agile, that they want to be more efficient. They want to have more bang for the buck. They want to deliver more and faster at a better level of predictability. The issue I have with that is that actually you want to become an agile organization because you want to learn. And ideally, you want to learn faster than your competitors, right? You want to provide autonomy, mastery, and purpose to your people who are working for you. Because this is not just an advantage in the war for talent, it's also a necessity because scaling agile only works if you descale the organization. You need to make it flatter. You need to cut out parts of the hierarchy. You need to delegate the power to make decisions to the people who are closest to the problems to solve, right? So it's all about risk mitigation. It's about, on the one side, but also on the other side, basically improving the return on investment. Becoming a learning organization can be a very lucrative business. Think of Amazon or Zemco or all the other companies that come to mind. So, but what we're still stuck with to an astonishing level from my perspective, I would like to refer to it as 21st century Taylorism, right? The application of scientific management rules from over 100 years ago, created by Mr. Taylor and to a certain extent also by Mr. Henry Ford, which resulted in functional silos and projects and budgets and initiatives. And all these things, particularly in larger companies, we have to deal with at the time. And it's not just limited to large corporations, in my experience. Even if you work in a fast-growing startup, it doesn't mean that it preserves the original culture of being lean and fast. The faster you grow, the higher the pressure gets to hire people with experience. And this usually means that you import this corporate culture into your fast-growing startup by hiring lots of people with a background in consultancies or in large corporations. So it's not stopping there. So becoming agile. When we have a look at the typical journey that the organization is taking, I mean, there's certainly no shortage of agile in whatever way. We all know this nice graphic by Lynn sketching about 40-something agile practices that are labeled here. I'm familiar with some parts of them, including X-Scale or large-scale Scrum. That's what I'm practicing at the moment. And of course, I also experienced in Scrum, Kanban. So you pick just what you want. Agility is branching out into the business, which I believe is a very good thing. If you are interested in learning more about the business agility, I really recommend the Business Agility Network. It's a great thing from Evan Laybourne. You will find links to that in the show notes. Then we have mentioned before the approach of package agile. I think that SAFe is the most popular and most prevailing of that. I don't know whether you've already had a look at the State of Agile survey from version 1. Supposedly, at least among the people who participated in that survey, almost 30% use SAFe. I doubt that SAFe is anything but agile, but instead of descaling the organization, they put even more processes into this, right? More familiar to every one of us is probably the Agile Onion, which nicely explains to a lot of people why doing cargo cult agile, why doing agile instead of being agile is so simple. Because if you start with processes and tools and put some practices on top of that, it doesn't mean you're becoming agile. The whiteboard at the wall and having stand-ups doesn't mean that you're agile. This takes significantly more. There are a lot of tests out there already, mainly addressing the team level. So, for example, rather well known is Henrik Knieberg's Scrum test. It's a simple test I also like to run with new teams. If you do this in regular cadence over a few weeks from time to time and you check back and everything is getting greener, the further to the right you move, your team is actually on the right track. But again, this is mainly at the team level. So, among the more elaborate models is the Agent Fluency project by James Shaw and Diana Larson, which is again focusing on the team, not the organization, but it covers the development of the team and the various stages of that. They also have an Agile Fluency team diagnostic tool, which is really interesting. I just participated in a facilitator workshop on that, and I ran it with my current teams, and it's really interesting. Once again, it's something that you want to do in a regular cadence, for example. However, it's not suited, it's not intended as well, to understand the status quo of an existing organization and figure out where that organization might go. But it's significantly more interesting than other approaches. So when we have a look at the path of an organization to become a learning organization, an agile organization, there are typically a lot of nagging questions at any given moment. The most interesting one is agile a destination or a journey? Agile maturity sounds like a destination, which is the reason I'm not fond of it. It somehow means that you achieve a certain level and then you're good to go. On the contrary, I believe it is a journey and it needs to be carefully tailored to each organization. Are we on the right route? Are we taking a detour or are we ending up in some kind of cul-de-sac or where are we? It's really tricky to understand, particularly if you have an organization with 500 or more people. You can easily check this with a 50 or 100 people startup, but beyond 500 people, it's getting very, very tricky. How do we know we're making progress? What metrics shall you track? What is it? Is it velocity? Certainly not. So again, you need to find your North Star on your own. And I believe this can be a different exercise for each organization. And finally, what will the return on investment be? We talk about investing significant amount of money into changing an organization. And this is what it is. It is change. We're not just talking about maybe hiring some coaches, but we also have to consider that we need to make significant investments to make this work. It's starting with the office. You can't get agile, I believe, in an open space with cubicles. It simply doesn't work this way. You also have to address the fear that a lot of people have. The typical approach would be to say, okay, you have job security, but no role security. No role security, however, means that you have to train people and give them time to pick up the new role and understand how this works. This is all a significant investment. And the question always is, okay, how much are we supposed to invest and what is the return on investment? Is every organization that is trying to become an agile organization supposed to become a holacracy or something like that? Possibly, I don't think so. Maybe an happy agile island in the engineering organization is a good goal, right? Who would deny that? So these are all the questions that we have to take into consideration before we can actually start making any kind of predictions or statements. So what do you do if you're not quite sure whether you understand the question in its completeness? You run a survey. So this is what I did end of last year, so around November. I was asking 4 questions. What factors contribute to a team's growing maturity? What maturity level do you see at the team level? What factors contribute to becoming agile or a learning organization? What maturity levels do you see at an organizational level? Now, the tricky thing is 4 open questions, which makes creating a kind of taxonomy really a stressful thing. So I went through all the answers of these 86 people, and it turned out that we can cluster the indicators into three main buckets. So that's people in communication, organizational excellence, as well as technical excellence. So let me walk you through the indicators that we were able to identify. So, self-organization, empower teams. People want to make decisions and they accept accountability. Focus on outcome instead of output. Respecting Scrum values, so commitment, focus, openness, respect, trust. Safety to raise and discuss issues was a major concern and also a very important indicator for most people. The teams are able to handle their own problems. People don't want to have scrum moms or a scrum master that do everything. So the scrum master that is acting like a drill sergeant is really not the preferred role, right? Supporting each other, holding each other accountable, pointing out that people understand agile as a team sport. It's not something that the individual can work with. Accountability. For example, people want to choose their own tools and devices. This will have another way of formulating it later on technical excellence, that people want to choose their own tech stack, for example. Typical answer is, I cannot accept accountability for something if I'm forced to use certain kind of technology. Let me choose my own tools and we're good to go. Learning. Mastery is based on learning with regard to the survey feedback. People want to have short feedback loops. So user tests shouldn't be something that is limited to the UX department. The engineers want to talk to users too. And also the classical lean startup approach of customer development is very important. People want to have meaningful retrospectives building on psychological safety that they can really address the issues that are problematic to them. Continuous team coaching. People want to spend time on becoming better at what they do. And this means if you have more than one team, that you basically have to invest time into things like chapters and guilds and tribes, that you need to think about how to build a sort of in-house academy to share the knowledge that everyone is gaining on a daily basis. It's expected that stakeholders live up to their responsibilities, and that hands-on experience is valued over credentialism. So people are not interested in seeing other people waving around their certificates. It's significantly more important to the people that someone has hands-on experience, that simply he or she has been through certain scenarios before and knows how to deal with them. Competence. An indicator for an agile organization is T-shaped people. So you're good at one thing, really good at one thing, but you're also okay at a lot of other things, again, which is demanding that you keep on learning inside the organization. It also requires that you actively share knowledge. So it's about continuous knowledge. It's also about that you're no longer incentivizing as an organization the withholding of knowledge. People want to see that people who are contributing by sharing knowledge are rewarded, not the other way around. It's also obvious that people want to have budget to attend conferences, to meet new people, meet with peers, and learn from other people. There's no necessity to reinvent the wheel over and over again. I think it's also a reason that, for example, the Hands-on Agile Slack community is so successful, because you can ask questions and you get decent answers in a short period of time by knowledgeable people. So, mastery team building, cross-functional teams. People want to be accountable for what they deliver. And that requires that you not just only be allowed to pick your own tools, but also that you have all necessary skills within your team that you can deliver end to end. Stable, long-living teams. The idea of moving around full-time employees between projects is a crazy one. There's a reason why professional military people are so focused on keeping the team together, because otherwise, how can you achieve this level of understanding of the skills of other people? Anyway, you know what I mean. Okay, support by an experienced Scrum Master. Yes, but not in the form of a drill sergeant. Yeah, it's really more about having a mentor and having a coach, so someone you can talk to in certain situations and coach, how can we solve a problem? Purpose. Purpose is strongly built around inclusion. It starts with product discovery, creating product roadmaps, and release planning. Okay, I guess most of us are working in the software field. So the idea that stakeholders throw requirement documents over the fence at night and then the engineers start to code them, is completely outdated. In my experience, the sooner you involve the engineers, the better. I've had great success with letting the engineers run the user interviews, much more successful than any form of other communication or spreading of knowledge. Communication and control, trust and respect. We're all on the same team, right? We want to be honest and we appreciate candid feedback. So no situations where someone is rightfully asking, why didn't you tell me that? If you're safe to communicate this, you can actually address issues that are troublesome to everyone. Conflict resolution. People agree the Intel/Amazon approach of disagree but commit approach. It doesn't mean there's the absence of conflict or communication or discussion, let me put it this way. But in the end, everyone wants the team to pull as a team. And no tyranny of compromise. I had to check that. It's referring to, okay, we stick with our values. This is what we do. No compromise on our values. And if one of our values is that we deliver a decent code quality, we're not making any compromise on that. Nonviolent communication. This is obvious from my perspective. I mean, how can you create a surrounding where people feel safe to address critical issues and give candid feedback if the level and the way of communication is not nonviolent? Collaboration, zero tolerance for political games. So everyone in the community of product builders is so fed up with this that I believe it's one of the most important issues any leadership of an up and becoming agile organization needs to address. So no scripted collaboration. People are also tired of these values printed on posters that are then put on the walls, right? Culture and values is what's happening when you're not looking. No incentives to withhold knowledge. That's another. So this old political game, I'm not telling you what I know, so you will fail, is simply not acceptable. We're all working as a team. We want to provide value to our customers and thus our organization. No finger pointing, no blame game. It doesn't help. If there's a problem, solve it, but don't start the witch hunt for one who can be held or can be blamed for the whole issue. Interestingly, people want a culture that embraces and celebrates failure. I found this interesting. I'm not sure what the celebrate failure part means. Probably it's just giving away a t-shirt to the one guy who managed to break the build pipeline. Another interesting point was curiosity as a norm. So again, it's more like this childlike approach of learning, going full in, being curious and not afraid to leave your comfort zone. Undogmatic attitude, live shuhari. So figure out what is working for your organization. And don't be a dogmatist sticking to some kind of whatever Bible. Transparency. People want information and data at all levels. And they want to end this habit of gating information or employing information brokers somewhere in the management. This is really a pain to most people. Leadership should focus on innovation, quality, and business value. And it needs to support the agile way of working fully. It needs to sponsor this. And at the same time, people would appreciate if Agile could really make it into the part of the organization. If everyone is aware, okay, we need to change the way we're working. It's no longer working this way. And of course, I expect that roles, principles, and processes are respected. So I think the most prominent victim we face most of the time is the product owner role in Scrum that's so easily demoted and thus made less and less effective. It is expected that managers become servant leaders. So switching position from someone who knows how to solve every problem to someone who is supporting the team that's actually solving the problem. People expect that they're entrusted, that they enjoy the benefit of the doubt, that they will deliver on what they want to deliver. And they expect that tools and facilities are provided that simply are required to become agile. And Gemba and Kaizen should become standard practices. So do not ask me to write a status report and then put it in the mail. If you want to know what's going on, dear manager, we have a stand-up at 11:15 every day and you're invited to join. Okay, and we have lots of whiteboards and we explain everything to you. Just come down to our place where we actually create value. As far as organizational design is concerned, most hated entity are functional silos, of course. People also want to see redundant middle management layers removed. And of course, command and control is an issue. I mean, how are you supposed to become agile if you do not trust in the team that is closest to the problem to actually find a fix for the problem? Also, people point at human resources, that human resources need to align with the new requirements of self-organizing teams. For example, titles are really an issue in certain organizations. If you provide someone with the title senior developer and that person is acting out like a senior developer or tech lead, even worse, within the Scrum team, there are certainly issues. And ideally, organizations are supposed to morph into a team of teams. People want to have clear objectives, so a shared vision among all actors, a clear strategy, clear priorities. This is, again, the application of Alice in Wonderland, right? If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Business value focus, yes, we're not acting in a vacuum. We're supposed to provide value to our customers and thus creating value for our organization too. And highly in demand is the switch from project budgets to product teams, so a different way of actually organizing everything. Engineering level, we have the usual suspects, so built-in quality, code reviews, test-driven development, XP, pair mob programming. Deployment at will is basically, for a lot of people, a standard indicator of being an agile organization, as well as regular cadence of releases, and that the organization managed to find suitable metrics. So, for example, throughput or lead time or something like that. So, based on these indicators, I started earlier this year to run a few workshops in Berlin and ask the local agile community, okay, what can we do about it? Can we probably come up with an agility assessment framework that we can open source and that provides everyone with a tool set to start assessing an organization for its potential to become an agile learning organization? So the question was, is Agile a fit for every organization? And if not, probably to a certain extent, wouldn't be great to know this in advance. At the time, also MVQ updated the culture and methods graph in Q1. And as you can see, a lot of Agile practices like Scrum and Vanilla Agile are meanwhile arriving even with a late majority. If you move further to the left, we come across the more interesting things like cross-functional teams or behavior-driven design or team self-selection, full-stack product teams, business agility, and still the innovators level of something like holacracy or no estimates and other interesting things that most of us are probably keen to experience and try themselves. So the idea behind the agility assessment framework is that you're a coach, and you're parachuting, so to speak, into an organization because the organization wants to become an agile organization and wants to know where to go and what to do. And it's not just willing to place a contract with one of the numerous consultancies. For example, ask McKinsey to introduce something at this level. So the question is, can the organization make an informed decision on becoming agile in advance? Which leads to the question whether we can answer certain questions. For example, is the organization able and willing to change? Where can the organization probably go? And where does the organization need to change? So the agility assessment framework simply needs to figure out how this works. So here are a few of the people. ThoughtWorks in Berlin is currently sponsoring everything. So they provide us with the room where we can meet and actually work. And my God, you won't believe this took 2 days of creating something. So creating a product with a committee of highly driven individuals that are used to do this for their own is quite challenging, I can tell you. But we're heading forward. So the idea is that we have a multiple step process, that we provide a toolbox that you can use to actually get this thing going. The part I will be taking care of is basically a set of questionnaires that would allow you at the beginning to get answers to the important questions, that let you allow an assessment of the organization, of the status quo, where the organization is at the moment, where it probably can go. So, for example, why and who? Why has the organization decided that they want to become agile? Wrong answers are typically, we want to become more efficient, we want to deliver more and faster, we want to merely improve predictability. The better answers, I believe, are still, we want to outperform our competitors by learning faster than they do. And we want to create a great culture, and we want to minimize risk, improve the return on investment. If the C-level is not willing to change, in the sense that if they're not willing to see performance outcome drop for a while because you can't switch it on. This is certainly a very bad indication for the whole transitional process. Another important question is, who is the sponsor of the decision? In my experience, if the basis wants to become agile, that is futile. If the leadership wants to become agile, but no other part of the organization, this is just going to be some kind of lip service for the next financial report. What you need to have is the support from the leadership on the one side, making clear that the organization has to change, that agile needs to become part of the DNA of the organization, as well as support from the basis, so the people in the trenches who actually do the work. Otherwise, it's not working. Organizational background. Of course, you need to understand what kind of organization you're talking about. Size, history, what culture is this? Is this a sales-driven organization or is it a nonprofit? The market is critical. I mean, are we talking about legacy products here? Is this a dying cash cow? Are we talking about a situation where the organization is more or less facing innovator's dilemma? What is the life cycle state of the cash cows? Is it close to sunset? And is the main product written with technical debt and basically no longer solvable? What customer base does the company have? Is it B2B, B2C? Is it mainly selling to state organizations? Is the business regulated by law? I mean, it's something completely different as far as a transition is concerned. If you compare a B2C company selling whatever directly to customers on the one side and a pharmaceutical company trying to develop new drugs. In my experience, a very important issue, but often underestimated aspect is budgeting. How is currently product development in this organization funded? Is it the traditional approach of setting up temporary projects or initiatives, or has the organization already set up some form of long-living product teams that are tasked to solve certain problems? The next question in that respect is, what kind of approval process is exercised? Are they using some kind of stage gate model, metered funding as it's called today, which I believe is a euphemism? Or is it product team basically funded upfront for the rest of the year and we expect that we make a return on investment on that? Next question would be, okay, who will control the budget for a transition? Is it the CEO, the CTO, the CFO? And how large is the budget? How is collaboration of the product teams developing within the organization? For example, with the business stakeholders, with customers, with the management, with the leadership. How are they doing this practically? How do they manage to get from a vision via a strategy and a portfolio and a product roadmap basically to delivering a product? How's that working? Again, is someone throwing requirements over the fence at night and expect the product team on the receiving end to deliver? I don't know. This is most critical because you will get a lot of different insights from various perspectives. What is the nature of teams in that organization? For example, what is the outsourcing level? Are there internal team members? Is everyone on a team basically a freelancer or a contractor? Or is the development outsourced to, for example, nearshoring or offshoring facilities? What about team longevity? Are people shifted around? Are people working on several projects at the same time? Is there some management entity that can pull people out of a product team at any given time and put them somewhere else? Do you have siloed teams, for example, or cross-functional teams? For example, a lot of larger organizations still run a QA silo where there's a certain handover. Of course, you can't afford to have a QA silo that is sort of testing something if you want to deploy at will and have a fully integrated deploy pipeline. It simply doesn't work. Are teams co-located? Another big question. Or are they scattered all over the landscape? And if they're not co-located, are they meeting in regular intervals? Nothing is more productive than basically meeting face to face. And if that's not possible, you can immediately say, okay, this is a negative indicator. How is the organization hiring new people? It starts with the diversity level, and it's not ending with the idea of, do we practice something like peer recruiting of team members? Does the team have the final say who's working on the team and who's at the later stage also contributing to the commitment the team probably makes? Or are new team members imposed on the team by HR or some kind of leadership? Are teams selecting themselves or someone putting them together? And we're talking about that, is HR pursuing an old school career development? What about autonomy, mastery, purpose? Or is it all about titles and certificates? What's the fluctuation rate among teams or within the organizations? Just to put this into perspective, Zemco has a decade-long fluctuation rate that is about 2% a year, not a month, a year. If you consider the turnover rate in a startup in Berlin, I can say it's certainly around 30 to 40%, at least, maybe 50% a year. That's something completely different. What about freelancers and employees' relations? Is there any form of differentiation between the two? Or does it principally not matter how the remuneration is handled in a technical way? What's the ratio between freelancers and employees? So for example, a lot of organizations, larger organizations, during the times of shareholder value, outsourced IT or software development to focus on core competencies. And now they understand that if the organization wants to survive, they need to desperately start developing software. And they find it very difficult to hire talented engineers because they basically have no culture in this. Team management. How are teams managed? Are they using OKRs or fancy deadlines or whatever? Is the organization somehow incentivizing individuals over teams, which is really critical? How are they handling failure? Is it more kind of, thank you that you figured out this problem in our delivery pipeline? Yes, it took the application offline for 3 minutes, but that was really great. Now we fixed it, and we'd like to celebrate that by giving you a t-shirt, something like that. Incentive schemes is another interesting issue, particularly in sales-driven organizations. Is the organization planning to change incentive schemes? Sometimes the what is in for me syndrome is opposing the interest the organization should have in other issues. The personal incentives are often colliding with the purpose of a team, pursuing personal agendas and having local optima. The workspace, I believe one factor that is really undervalued for the productivity of any team. Do we actually have a space available where team can work in an agile manner? I don't know about you, but in my case, we have a high need of whiteboards because we like to visualize extensively for stakeholder communication almost everything. It's not just the sprint boards, we also have the roadmap and the backlog, technical debt, etc. pp. So if you don't have walls where you can put up whiteboards, it's really tricky. Do you have to find team spaces where the whole team sits together? Do you have small ad hoc collaboration spaces where you can actually sit down and work with a few people? Do you have some kind of spaces where people really can shut off for 3 hours and just focus on getting something right that requires their concentration? And also, is there a budget for working offsite, to get out of the comfort zone of the usual office? A lot of issues, tools and technology, on-premise versus cloud. Can I bring my own tech? Can I choose my own tools and software? People will not be happy if they're forced to work on a Microsoft tech stack, right? This is really not common today. And you cannot expect to hire top-notch engineers if you force them to work on some kind of Azure web apps or something like that. What's certainly also important is to understand to what level an organization, even if it's formally not yet agile or has never kicked off that, to what level agile practices are already used inside the organization, probably in a guerrilla mode or in a, I don't care what the company says, we just do it this way mode. So ask what they're already using. So Lean Startup, Lean UX, Design Thinking, Scrum, Kanban, XP, whatever comes to your mind.